Cadet Elena Vance walked across the long metal corridor of the Terran Coalition Naval Academy with steady steps. Her uniform was simple, her boots quiet, but inside she carried a sense of focus that never seemed to fade. Today was supposed to be a normal training day. Nothing special, nothing stressful. She had been assigned to the Zero-G Defense Dome for a standard practice drill, the kind every first-year cadet faced at least twice a month. It was usually easy, or at least predictable. That was why she walked calmly, letting her mind move through the usual preparation steps. She expected nothing strange. She expected no surprises. But the academy was a place where surprises always waited in corners. Elena just didn't know one was already waiting inside the dome. She entered through the sliding pressure door, and the large spherical chamber opened before her. The dome was huge, a hollow ball lined with soft wall pads and anchor bars, bright enough for clear visibility, but neutral enough that the mind could stay focused. Everything in the chamber floated gently when the gravity was disabled, which forced cadets to learn how to move without steady footing. No one in the universe maneuvered in microgravity as smoothly as well-trained humans, and drills like these were a major reason why. Elena took a slow breath, closed her locker, and checked her simple practice gear. Light gloves, secure boots, thin training pads. Nothing heavy, nothing sharp, nothing dangerous. The academy did not allow risky equipment inside the dome. Every tool found here was soft, carefully designed, and non-harmful. Meant only for training reflexes, not causing injuries. She attached her small identification chip to the wristband and turned toward the main chamber. The system scanned her and accepted her entry. But as she floated in through the gate, she sensed something was different. The lights were slightly dimmer than usual, and she heard faint whispers, 3 voices, maybe 4. She couldn't tell from where. She pushed forward into the center of the dome, letting her body adjust to zero gravity. Her hair lifted gently, floating behind her in a soft wave. She breathed slowly, letting her heartbeat settle into a calm rhythm. She practiced enough to remain steady in this environment. Calm was natural to her, but something else moved behind her. Quiet, quick, coordinated. Elena didn't look back right away. She didn't want to reveal she had noticed. Instead, she waited, drifting forward, as if nothing unusual were happening. She examined the far side of the dome, where 3 of her classmates were supposed to meet her. They were nowhere to be seen. According to the schedule, she should have been practicing with an instructor-guided drone system, not with other cadets. That was the first odd detail. The second odd detail arrived as a soft thump of movement on her right. She slowly rotated her body, pretending it was part of her warm-up routine. Her eyes caught a shadow pulling itself behind a floating rail. Then another, and another. 3 shapes. Human. Cadets. All hiding. All waiting. Elena finally understood. They were planning something. They thought she couldn't see them. They thought she would drift blindly into whatever they prepared. If this were a real threat, she would take action to defend herself. But she could see right away that this was not real danger. They carried only soft training items. Their body language was playful, careless, confident in a way that told her they meant no harm. Probably a prank. Probably an attempt to embarrass her. Maybe they wanted to show the rest of the class she wasn't as skilled as everyone believed. She had seen behavior like this before: competitive teasing, small rivalry, silly overconfidence. The academy was filled with people who wanted to prove themselves. And sometimes, they used the wrong methods. But Elena did not feel anger. She felt curiosity. She also felt ready. She let herself rotate just enough to catch a glimpse of the first cadet Joran holding onto a rail above her, preparing to push off with far too much force. His movement would probably send him flying straight toward her, without the ability to stop. Another cadet, Makai, crouched behind a barrel-shaped equipment module, gripping a training baton made of soft padded foam. The third one, Threst, floated near the control panel, thinking he was unseen even though his floating reflection gave him away on the dome's curved metal surface. Elena turned away as if she had noticed nothing at all. She allowed herself to drift toward the center of the dome again, slowly rotating her body to the left. Her arms spread gently for balance. Her feet found no floor. Her entire body moved like someone who understood zero gravity like a second home. She listened. The faint scrape of gloves against a rail, a shallow breath, a quiet tap of a boot hitting a wall pad. Her senses sharpened. She could almost feel the moment they decided to spring their ambush. The air shifted, not physically, but in mood. Their whispers stopped. Their bodies tensed. And then, with the soft whoosh of released force, Joran launched himself toward her. Elena did not turn her head. She simply raised her arm a little, adjusting her position with a light push against a handhold bar that drifted near her. This turned her body to the right, just as Joran expected to hit her from behind. Instead of colliding with her, he passed beneath her arm, missing her by several inches. She caught his forearm not tightly, but gently, allowing him to keep his momentum while she gave him a little redirection. It was a smooth and harmless rotation. Joran's body drifted around her like a slow-moving satellite. She never grabbed him. She only guided him. This simple motion placed his drifting form between her and the other two cadets. Elena remained calm. She wasn't using strength. She was using timing. The other cadets had expected her to panic. They expected her to freeze or flail or call for help. Instead, she moved with the kind of clarity that made it seem like she had known this would happen all along. Mackay realized his timing was ruined, but he still launched from behind the equipment module anyway. He pushed too hard, his legs kicking outward in a way that guaranteed he would not be able to change course once he started. Elena watched him approach. She didn't feel threatened. She only felt aware. She let Joran's drifting body become her shield, not by placing him in the way, but by simply allowing his existing movement to continue. He floated directly across Mackay's line of travel. Mackay had to slow, grabbing at the module to prevent colliding with his teammate. This stop gave Elena a quiet moment to breathe. Threst seemed unsure whether to join the engagement or wait. Elena saw him adjusting his posture, trying to decide the best angle of approach. He floated a little too high, almost bumping his head on the light fixture ring at the top of the dome. In zero gravity, even small mistakes could become large ones. Elena felt a small rush of amusement, not because she wanted him to fail, but because she saw how much they underestimated the environment. She turned gently in midair, letting her left hand brush against a rail so lightly that it almost didn't look like contact. But it was enough. Her body rotated into perfect alignment again. The cadets watched her now with confusion. They hadn't expected her to remain this composed. Their so-called ambush was falling apart before it even fully began. Elena didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She simply existed in the space, as if she belonged there more than gravity itself. Joran drifted past her shoulder, turning slowly like a relaxed swimmer. Elena gave him a small nudge to steady his spin. He wasn't harmed. He wasn't trapped. He was simply out of position. Mackay regained control and attempted a new angle. But Elena shifted aside easily, gliding left with the grace of someone who understood exactly where every rail, pad, and floating object was located. Threst finally moved in, but he moved too close to Mackay. They crossed arcs and had to stop to avoid tangling. Elena observed their hesitation, noting how their confidence was breaking apart like fragile frost. She floated backward, adjusting with the tiniest push, always calm, always balanced. The dome might have looked like empty space to most cadets, but Elena saw lines, vectors, directions of force. She saw paths. She saw opportunities. She let her breathing slow. She let her mind settle. The ambush had begun, but Elena was already 3 steps ahead. And this was only the first moment of what would become a lesson none of them would forget. Elena floated in the center of the dome with calm control, her eyes watching the 3 cadets who had tried to surprise her. Joran was still drifting slowly from her earlier redirection, turning like a leaf moved by a gentle breeze. Mackay clung to the equipment module, confused by how smoothly she had avoided his approach. Threst hovered near the upper support ring, gripping a bar with both hands as he tried to understand why their plan had fallen apart before it even began. Elena was not angry with them. She knew these kinds of pranks happened often in the academy. Young cadets liked to test each other, to see who was faster, smarter, or more prepared. They didn't mean harm. They only wanted to prove themselves. Elena understood that. What she didn't understand was how they thought they could catch her off guard in a place she knew so well. She let her body drift gently backward until her boots brushed lightly against a wall pad. The moment she felt the pad's softness, she pushed off with the smallest touch. That subtle movement sent her gliding back toward the center of the dome again. Her posture was relaxed, but her eyes remained sharp. Mackay was the first to move again. He was impulsive by nature, always quick to act before fully thinking. Elena had trained with him before and knew his habits well. Now she watched as he adjusted his grip on the soft baton, preparing for a second attempt. His expression showed frustration mixed with determination. Threst finally began his own approach. Unlike Mackay, Threst was careful and calculated. He preferred slow, deliberate movements. He stayed higher than the others, most likely planning to descend toward her from above, hoping gravity or the lack of it would mask his approach. Joran, meanwhile, was still floating without full control. He tried to twist around and stabilize himself, but each move he made only caused him to rotate slightly more. Elena considered helping him but decided it was better to let his momentum carry naturally for the moment. She would use it soon. She already knew that. The instructor outside the dome, watching through the observation window, had stopped adjusting controls. He seemed curious. Elena didn't look his way, but she sensed eyes following her movement. A real drill wasn't happening. This was turning into something else entirely, a test maybe, but not one designed by the Academy. A test made by the cadets themselves, even if they did not realize it. Threst made his first move. He pushed off from the upper bar with a small burst of force, sending himself downward at a controlled angle. His movement was smooth, careful, almost professional. Elena respected that. He had taken time to study her previous reactions. He had waited until she positioned herself in the center again. Threst always tried to find the best angle, the best timing. Mackay, seeing Threst in motion, decided he could not wait any longer. He pushed himself outward from the equipment module again, this time with more calmness than before. He tried to make his path predictable, keeping his baton tucked close to avoid slowing himself. Elena could tell he learned a tiny lesson from his first mistake. Joran, still drifting, finally managed to reach out and catch a rail bar on the far side of the dome. His fingers clung to it desperately, and his body jolted slightly as his momentum stopped. From that position, he tried to re-enter the engagement, pulling himself along the bar to join the others. Elena understood the situation instantly. Two cadets approaching from different angles, one rejoining from behind them. They were unintentionally forming a triangle around her. It would have been a dangerous situation if actual weapons or harmful intent were involved, but here everything was soft and safe. Still, their spacing proved interesting. She took a breath and prepared. Threst descended first, moving quietly, hoping she wouldn't notice him. Elena made no attempt to dodge yet. She waited until he reached the halfway point of his arc. That was the moment she gently pushed her fingertips against a floating sphere-shaped sensor nearby. Even the slightest push in zero gravity caused change. Her body rotated gracefully to the left, and she drifted sideways just enough to slip out of Threst's predicted path. Threst passed by her shoulder, surprised, but unable to stop. Elena reached out with her hand, only brushing his forearm. That soft touch nudged him just enough to redirect his path, without causing discomfort or trapping him. He floated past her but now angled toward Mackay's direction. Meanwhile, Mackay was approaching fast enough that he couldn't change direction easily. His eyes widened as he realized Threst's movement was overlapping with his own. They weren't going to collide painfully. The dome was designed to prevent harm, but they were going to cross each other's path in a very messy way. Elena didn't wait. She let the rotation of her earlier push continue, then reached out toward Joran's rail as he neared the others. She never grabbed him forcefully. Instead, she tapped the rail lightly just above his hand. The rail was a long, floating piece meant for anchoring, and her touch caused it to swing a little. That tiny movement caused Joran to shift position, turning him slightly toward the center of the group. Suddenly, the three cadets found themselves drifting toward each other in a tangled, unplanned cluster. Not crashing, not in danger, but slowing and adjusting awkwardly as they tried not to bump into one another. Their perfect spacing was gone. Their angles were ruined. And Elena had used no strength, no force, only gentle adjustments. The situation became almost humorous. Makai's baton lightly tapped Threst's shoulder. Threst grabbed a floating rail to stop himself, which sent him drifting sideways instead. Joran tried to avoid Makai's leg and ended up twisting around in a strangely slow rotation. None of them were hurt. None of them were scared. They were simply confused and very embarrassed. Elena watched them with calm patience. She floated closer, using the smallest push from a wall pad. She approached Joran first. She extended her hand. He looked confused but accepted her help. She didn't pull him hard. She simply steadied his movement so he would stop rotating. Then she let him drift naturally into a balanced position. Makai tried to regain control, but Elena reached him next. She touched his wrist gently and guided it downward, helping him gain stability. Makai blinked at her as if she were doing something impossible. Threst hovered above them, gripping the rail tightly with both hands, breathing quickly but trying to hide it. Elena drifted up toward him and rested her hand gently on the back of the rail, creating a counterpressure that helped him straighten his posture. None of them spoke at first. The dome remained silent except for faint sounds of equipment humming and soft breaths echoing in the hollow space. Finally, Joran found his voice. How did you do all that?" he asked, sounding more surprised than frustrated. Elena offered a small smile. "Zero gravity has rules. You learn the rules, and the space becomes your friend." Makai blinked at her. We weren't trying to hurt you. It was supposed to be a simple surprise. A harmless one." "I know," she replied softly. "You didn't plan anything bad. But you didn't plan well, either." Threst let out a quiet laugh, embarrassed but relieved. "We thought we could confuse you." Elena shook her head. "Confusion only happens when you let the space control you. I don't let it. I move with it." The instructor outside the dome pressed the comm button. His voice echoed slightly through the chamber. "Cadet Vance," he said with interest. "I didn't interrupt because I wanted to see how you handled that situation. I must say, you handled it better than most third-year cadets." Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks, not from embarrassment, but from humility. She never liked being praised too heavily. She only nodded. The instructor continued. "You three, on the other hand, might want to reflect on what you just experienced." Joran groaned softly. Makai rubbed the back of his neck. Threst sighed. Elena floated backward again, letting them reorganize themselves. She didn't mock them. She didn't brag. She simply observed as they tried to understand what had happened. She knew this was only the beginning. The situation had shifted. Their failed ambush had become an unplanned lesson. And now they looked at her differently, not with rivalry but with respect mixed with curiosity. Elena prepared herself. The dome was quiet for a moment, but she sensed another round coming. They weren't done trying, and she wasn't done teaching not with words, but with movement. The real test, she knew, had not yet begun. Elena drifted slowly in the center of the dome, her eyes following the three cadets as they tried to regain their composure. Joran floated a few meters away, gripping a floating rail, trying to steady himself. Makai hovered cautiously near a soft, padded wall, still holding his baton. Threst remained above, hands on a support bar, watching Elena carefully. All three had learned something already. She was not someone to be surprised easily, but that realization had only made them more determined. Elena knew their next moves would be more thoughtful. They would approach carefully, testing her, trying to find a weak moment. She adjusted her posture slightly, letting her body float in perfect balance, ready to respond. She had trained for moments like this. Zero-gravity combat drills were not about strength. They were about thinking, timing, and understanding the environment. Humans had an instinctive ability to do that. It was why cadets like her excelled where others struggled. Makai made the first move. He pushed off the wall gently, gliding toward Elena in a slower, more calculated motion than before. He had learned from his previous mistakes, controlling his momentum and trying to anticipate her movements. His baton floated in front of him, ready to simulate an engagement, though Elena knew it could never truly harm her. She smiled slightly, not mockingly, but because she admired his effort. Threst followed shortly after, choosing a path from above. He was precise, moving along a careful arc to descend in a way that would make interception difficult. He had learned to think in 3 dimensions, and he had tried to use it to his advantage. Joran stayed behind at first, still adjusting his own drift. Elena allowed him a moment to recover, knowing he would soon join. She didn't rush him. Patience was one of her strengths. She had learned it from hours of observation and practice. In a situation like this, patience could change everything. As Makai approached, Elena rotated her body slightly to the left, just enough to adjust her position without making it obvious. She let his own momentum guide him closer, knowing that the combination of his forward motion and her gentle shift would place him in the exact position she wanted. Threst's arc descended at a slightly faster pace than Makai's. Elena reached out a hand, lightly touching a floating sensor near her. The sensor moved slightly, and her touch created a small change in the surrounding airflow and her own rotation. Threst noticed the slight movement too late to adjust his path. He drifted past her just as she had intended, slightly off-center from her previous position, giving her the space she needed. Makai, now closer, realized he could not reach her from the current angle. Elena used the smallest movement of her legs against a rail to glide gently to the side, keeping her body stable while shifting her position by just a few centimeters. In zero gravity, small adjustments were enough to completely change trajectories. Makai, moving too quickly to adjust perfectly, ended up slightly misaligned, almost brushing past her but never touching. Joran, seeing his friend's move, finally decided it was time to join. He pushed himself off the rail with a controlled burst. His rotation and drift were much smoother than before, showing he had learned from the first attempt. Elena, noticing his change, allowed him to approach closer, not to block him, but to use him as part of the unfolding plan. She had already calculated the next step. She didn't need to act aggressively. Instead, she would guide their movements using subtle contact and gentle adjustments. Humans had an advantage here. Their minds were flexible, capable of understanding patterns and predicting motion. They could think 3 steps ahead while their bodies responded instinctively. Makai reached a point directly in line with Elena. She extended a hand lightly, brushing his forearm not in a grab, not in a push, but as a gentle guide. His forward motion continued, slightly redirected, and he drifted into a position that blocked Threst's path without either of them colliding. Threst, now approaching the lower section, adjusted instinctively, trying to avoid contact. Elena made another small movement, extending her fingers to lightly tap the rail near him. The gentle nudge was enough to rotate his trajectory, allowing him to pass safely without disrupting the flow of the engagement. Joran, still drifting from the rail, found himself in the middle of the 3. Elena used the smallest push off a wall pad to rotate slightly, letting him glide past her position. In that moment, she had positioned all 3 cadets in such a way that none of them could reach her directly without moving through each other's space. The result was almost artistic. The 3 cadets floated around her in a kind of imperfect symmetry, moving but unable to converge. Elena observed, calm and composed, letting the situation unfold like a carefully designed puzzle. She did not need to intervene with force. Her understanding of motion and timing was enough. She reached out again, lightly adjusting a floating panel near her. The small push caused subtle changes in airflow and trajectories, enough to redirect Makai slightly to the left, Joran slightly downward, and Threst slightly to the right. All 3 adjusted instinctively, their movements still precise but now unknowingly following the path Elena had set. A soft laugh escaped Threst, despite himself. How are you doing this?" he asked, voice full of curiosity. I don't know what's happening." Elena smiled gently. "I'm not stopping you," she said. "I'm only guiding you. You're moving as you should. but in a way you didn't expect. That's all. Mackay blinked, trying to understand. But we're supposed to be attacking you. Elena shook her head. You're moving. You're doing fine. You just didn't realize the rules of space work in more than one way. Here, movement is like water. It flows. You can guide it, but you can't force it. Joran, who had regained some stability, looked at her with wide eyes. So, you're saying you're using us? Without even touching us properly? Elena nodded. Exactly. Sometimes, the best way to manage a situation is by understanding it. The moment you fight blindly, you lose. The moment you move with awareness, you control more than you realize. The three cadets were silent for a moment, floating in place as they considered her words. It was not just a physical lesson but a mental one. The dome, zero gravity. Their own motion all became tools that Elena could understand and control. While they had been trying to act without full awareness, Elena decided to take the next step. She reached out to Joran, lightly touching his wrist. His movement slowed, not because she restrained him, but because her touch allowed him to stabilize and find balance. Mackay drifted closer, and she extended a hand to guide his rotation gently. Threst, noticing the calm approach, allowed her to guide his final descent. In less than a minute, all three cadets were positioned in a way that made them unable to approach her directly. Their momentum was still theirs, but it had been redirected without any need for force. They floated, slightly embarrassed, slightly amazed, and completely unharmed. The instructor outside the dome pressed the intercom again. "Cadet Vance," he said, voice echoing slightly. "I must admit, your ability to control the situation without touching them forcefully is impressive. I've never seen a first-year cadet manage zero-gravity motion so effectively." Elena felt her cheeks warm slightly, but she remained humble. "Thank you, sir. I just understand how movement works. The environment is part of the process, not just the people." Joran looked at her in awe. "I didn't think it was possible. We tried everything, and you just guided us?" Elena nodded. "Yes. I didn't stop you. I didn't fight you. I only understood where you were going and helped you move differently. That's all humans need. Sometimes a little understanding of patterns." Mackay finally relaxed. "I've never seen anyone do that before, not even in advanced drills." Threst nodded. "We thought we could outsmart you, but we were just part of your plan, without knowing it." Elena smiled softly. "It's not a plan in the traditional sense. It's awareness, observation, patience. You all have the tools. You just need to recognize them." Ah, the three cadets, once confident and now humbled, floated quietly as Elena drifted gently to the center. She let herself hover for a moment, appreciating the balance of the dome, the soft hum of the environment, the gentle movements of her classmates. The light reflections on the walls, all combined into a perfect, calm scene. In that moment, Elena realized something important. Humans had a natural ability to adapt, to observe, to understand, without force. That ability was what made them exceptional. They could solve problems creatively, improvise under pressure, and use their environment intelligently. Even here, in a small dome with soft walls and floating cadets, those abilities shone brightly. The cadets looked at her differently now. They were no longer trying to ambush or compete aggressively. They had learned something they would remember, not just about zero-gravity movement, but about awareness, patience, and understanding. Elena felt no pride in defeating them. She only felt calm satisfaction that the lesson had been absorbed. This was how humans grew stronger. By thinking, by understanding, by moving with intelligence rather than force. The dome remained quiet, but Elena knew the exercise was not over. These cadets would try again, learn again, improve, and she would continue to guide, not to overpower, but to teach. That was the true power of human ingenuity. Floating in the soft glow of the dome, Elena realized this was what made humanity remarkable. Not brute strength, not advanced weapons, but the ability to adapt, to understand, and to solve problems creatively. And in this small, controlled environment, she had just proven it once again. Elena floated in the center of the dome, feeling the gentle shift of air around her as the three cadets slowly adjusted to their new positions. The soft hum of the Academy's systems filled the silence. For a moment, the dome felt like a world of its own, separate from schedules, exams, and rules, a place where thought and motion were the only realities that mattered. Joran was the first to speak. I finally understand. It's not about attacking or stopping you. It's about predicting and moving with awareness. His voice carried a mixture of surprise and admiration. He had learned something far more valuable than any drill score could provide. Elena nodded slightly. Exactly. Every environment has rules. The more you understand them, the less you need to fight blindly. You can guide situations with knowledge instead of force. Humans, especially cadets, have an advantage because we can learn fast and adapt quickly. Makai floated closer, still gripping the baton but no longer using it aggressively. So, you're saying we were part of your lesson without even realizing it? He asked, a hint of awe in his voice. We thought we were testing you. But we were learning instead. Elena smiled softly. Yes, you were moving naturally, following your instincts, and I simply responded in a way that let you continue your motion safely. Learning doesn't have to come from stopping or controlling others. It can come from understanding them. Threst, who had been quiet, finally relaxed his grip on the support bar and let himself float closer to the others. I didn't think it could be done. We tried everything we could think of, and you managed it all without pushing or hitting anyone. Elena shrugged lightly. Strength isn't always measured by force. Sometimes it's measured by patience, timing, and perception. That's what makes humans. We can see patterns others don't notice and use them to solve problems. The three cadets exchanged glances, still processing what had happened. The confidence that had fueled their initial ambush was gone, replaced by a mixture of respect and curiosity. They realized that in trying to test Elena, they had been tested themselves, not by strength, but by understanding. Joran's expression shifted. So, this is why humans are considered valuable in the coalition missions. Not because we can fight better, but because we can think differently? Elena's gaze drifted toward the dome's curved walls, where the soft lights reflected like distant stars. Exactly. Other species may have more strength or speed, but humans can improvise, adapt, and solve problems creatively. We notice things others overlook. We find solutions where there seem to be none. That's the edge we bring, no matter where we go. Makai floated quietly, turning his baton absent-mindedly in his hands. It's strange. I always thought drills were just about practice and scoring points, but this feels different, like we've experienced something bigger than just a test. Elena nodded. Every drill can be bigger than you expect if you pay attention. Situations teach lessons beyond what is written in schedules. The real learning comes when you notice patterns, when you adjust, when you think instead of react. Threst finally laughed softly, shaking his head. I never imagined zero gravity could be used this way. We always think about speed and contact, but it's really about flow and awareness, isn't it? Yes, Elena said. Flow, understanding, observation. That's how you control situations without force. That's how humans succeed where others may fail. Strength isn't always visible. Sometimes, it's in your mind and your choices. The instructor outside the dome pressed the intercom once again. Cadets, he said, voice calm but impressed. I've observed many drills and simulations, but what just happened is remarkable. Cadet Vance, your ability to manage this scenario without aggressive action demonstrates a level of understanding that exceeds your current rank. All three of you should take note. Intenset. Joran floated slightly upward, still amazed. I think I finally see why humans are unique. You can change outcomes without even fighting. Joran floated slightly upward. Makai nodded. We were trying to test her, but she taught us instead. And without force, Threst let go of the rail completely, letting himself float freely near the ceiling of the dome. It's inspiring. I feel like we've been given a glimpse of what we could do if we learned to think the same way. Elena smiled, drifting gently toward the center of the dome. It's not impossible. You already have the tools. You just need to observe, to remain calm, and to think ahead. The moment you panic or act without awareness, you lose. The moment you think, adapt, and guide, you gain more than anyone can take away. The cadets stayed quiet, absorbing her words. There was no humiliation in their faces, only a growing understanding and respect. They realized that competition and rivalry could teach more than training drills alone if approached with the right mindset. Joran finally spoke again. Cadet Vance, I think we've all learned something today that we won't forget. Not just about drills, but about how to approach problems in general. Elena nodded. That's the idea. Every challenge is an opportunity. Every obstacle teaches something if you are willing to pay attention. That's what makes humans exceptional. Not just here, but anywhere we go in the universe. Makai, floating a little closer to the center, said softly, I never realized we could move like this in zero gravity. It's beautiful in a way. Not just the dome, but the way movement works. The way everything interacts. Elena's eyes softened. Yes. There's a rhythm to everything, even in space. Understanding that rhythm lets you navigate challenges without conflict, without fear. You simply move with the flow and adjust wisely. Threst looked around the dome, watching the soft lights and the floating cadets. It feels almost like we're dancing, but with purpose. Not just random moves, but each action has meaning. That's right, Elena said gently. Every movement has consequences, and every choice changes the outcome. Humans notice patterns, connect dots others miss, and adapt faster than most. That is why we succeed in situations others might find impossible. Joran floated forward, curiosity in his eyes. Do you think this is what it feels like when humans work with other species? We solve problems they cannot because we see differently? Elena nodded. Exactly. Our minds are flexible. We improvise. We find solutions creatively. Other species may have more strength or endurance, but humans have ingenuity. That ingenuity changes outcomes everywhere we go. 1. Makai smiled, slowly letting his baton float freely beside him. I think I understand now. It's not about fighting harder. It's about thinking better, noticing patterns, and using what's around you. Elena's face softened with warmth. Yes. You've learned more than just movement. You've learned how observation, patience, and creativity can solve challenges even when force isn't an option. That is a uniquely human skill. That is why humanity succeeds where others might fail. Threst exhaled, floating in place and smiling. I think we've underestimated what humans can do. We focused on strength, but it's the mind that wins in the end. Joran nodded, drifting closer to Elena. Thank you for showing us this without even needing to fight. I think we'll remember this lesson for a long time. Elena smiled softly. You'll remember it, not because I told you, but because you experienced it. You felt the movement, the adjustment, and the understanding. Lessons that come from experience stay with you longer than any words. The dome remained quiet for a moment, the soft hum of machinery and distant lights creating a peaceful atmosphere. The three cadets floated, reflecting on what had happened. Their initial plans completely changed. They were no longer trying to ambush her. They were no longer thinking in terms of winning or losing. Instead, they thought about awareness, understanding, and human ingenuity. Elena felt a calm satisfaction. She hadn't defeated them in a fight. She hadn't even competed. She had guided, observed, and adjusted. And in doing so, she had shown the cadets a truth about humanity. That intellect, creativity, and perception were as powerful as any physical ability. The instructor's voice came through the intercom one last time. Cadets, the drill is complete. Cadet Vance, your performance demonstrates the qualities we value most in humans: observation, adaptability, and creative problem-solving. Well done. Everyone else should reflect on what they've seen. The cadets nodded, floating silently as the dome lights shifted back to normal training mode. Elena drifted slowly toward the exit, letting herself glide with ease. She turned briefly to see the three cadets watching her with a mixture of admiration and curiosity. As she approached the sliding door, she said softly, "Remember, strength is useful, but understanding is what truly makes a difference. Move with awareness, adapt quickly, and notice patterns. That is how humans succeed anywhere." The cadets nodded again, this time with smiles. They had been humbled, taught, and inspired, all without harm, all without force. They understood something about movement, strategy, and human ingenuity that no textbook could convey. Elena passed through the pressure door and back into the academy corridor. The hum of activity greeted her. The sound of cadets training. Voices echoing. Footsteps on metal floors. Everything seemed normal, but she knew the day had been far from ordinary. Her calm walk continued, but inside, she felt the satisfaction of having shared a lesson without force, without conflict, and with full respect for everyone involved. Humans, she thought, had a unique gift. They could change outcomes not by strength alone, but by awareness, observation, and ingenuity. And that gift would always make them remarkable in the universe. As Elena walked down the corridor, she glanced back at the dome one last time. The three cadets were already floating in small groups, discussing quietly among themselves. Their expressions were thoughtful, inspired, and full of curiosity. They had seen something they would never forget. A demonstration of human skill, intelligence, and creativity that no simple ambush or drill could match. Elena smiled, knowing that humanity had once again proven its value not through power, not through aggression, but through cleverness, observation, and understanding. And that was a victory worth more than any score, medal, or recognition. Floating through the halls of the academy, she felt the quiet pride of knowing that one day, humans like her would face challenges across the stars, and their ingenuity, patience, and intelligence would always give them the edge. The future belonged not just to those who were strong, but to those who could think, adapt, and guide situations with skill and care. And with that thought, Elena walked onward, ready for whatever challenge came next, knowing that humans, in their own quiet way, could achieve greatness anywhere in the universe.